In this episode, we discuss Wes Craven's iconic Nightmare on Elm Street. This is the first Freddy Krueger movie back from 1984. Who is Freddy? What does Freddy represent? We dive into that question. We try to unpack Freddy. We also talk about Wes Craven's other movies, including many similarities between Nightmare and Shocker, Freddy and Horace Pinker. Lots of similarities. John takes us on a deep dive into masochistic dreams. And we also ponder the eternal question, do parents just not understand? Come and give a listen. John.
Brian, hello. How you doing?
I'm okay, John. I'm okay. How are you?
Thanks for checking. I appreciate when you check in to see how I'm doing, and I'm doing okay.
Yeah, that's good. I care about you, and I got to do that check-in, you know.
We got to check in on each other, make sure we haven't gone delirious from all this hiking and isolation.
Yeah. We're all we have for each other out here. You know, if one of us loses it or has a knife injury or has a bad dream, I mean, who are we going to turn to but each other?
I look left, I look right, nobody but you.
Right. I'm on both sides of you.
Yeah. You're just so agile.
Yeah. And not only that, much like Freddy Krueger, I can also, I'm sure I do, inhabit your dreams.
Right. Yeah. No, you're constantly in my dreams. You're constantly in my reality, in my waking state.
And I like to wear sweaters and funny hats. So,
hiking sweaters. Yeah.
I read something that the appearance of Freddy Krueger, a 1984 version, his rugby sweater, black and red, and his bowler hat was meant to be reminiscent of a homeless man.
Hobo.
Did you have that thought? And nothing was more terrifying in the 1980s than a homeless man.
Yeah, if you're destitute, that's the worst place to be. Wes Craven said that he chose a sweater of green and red because he read someplace that those colors clash the most.
Oh, wow.
Just the combination and nearness causes distress.
Wes Craven of Shocker directorial fame as well.
Shocker, People Under the Stairs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We had just seen Shocker, and I noticed a few similarities to Shocker.
It was shocking how similar it was.
In Shocker, we have Steven Pinker, the serial killer who will not die.
Have we introduced what we've watched?
Well, yeah, we've watched Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984.
Okay. 1984, yeah.
And Freddy Krueger is a murderer who was executed, not by the state, but by some kind of vigilante justice, and he will not die.
They grabbed the pitchforks and the torches, and they burned the man.
Yeah, there was a technicality, and he was acquitted, and the parents took it upon themselves to corner him in some kind of area and burn him.
Parents' justice.
Yeah, parents don't like getting their kids murdered.
20 of them. Do you know that 20 kids got murdered?
I took that note. Yeah, 20 of them. And just like Shocker, we have 20 murders in a neighborhood, and similar to Horace Pinker, who slaughtered an entire family a night. Another similarity is that Horace Pinker self-animated inside of household objects. There's the hilarious scene in Shocker where he manifests as a Barca lounger.
Yes.
And we have that same effect with Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger comes out of a ceiling at one point, sort of manifesting as the wall and a bed and a bathtub full of water he can appear in as well.
Well, during dreams, yeah. And
Right.
For those who haven't heard our episode on Shocker, check it out.
It's one of our better ones, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not as good as this one's going to be.
No.
And the third similarity that I just forgot is ...
I think Freddy could have gotten away with 5 murders. I think 20 murders of children seems a bit much. Maybe back in 84, people were just more tolerant of child murderers.
Mm-hmm.
For the entire movie, I thought he was a molester. I don't know if that was because of a shift that comes later and that was inherited from seeing a more recent movie of Nightmare on Elm Street, or I don't know. I don't know why. I just assumed that he was a child predator until you mentioned to me, actually, that he wasn't.
Just in casual conversation, yeah, I mentioned that. I read a trivia piece. He was originally going to be a child molester, and I believe in the later movies he is one. However, in the first iteration of the series, they changed him to just a child murderer out of sensitivity toward a recent news event.
Right. It's less sensitive to kill a child than it is to molest them.
Somehow that's true in our ethical framework. Yeah, this movie had a lot of similarities to Shocker, and I didn't particularly find it scary. Freddy Krueger's like the ultimate horror movie character. He doesn't wear a mask, unlike Jason and Michael Myers, and he lets you see his face, which is burned.
Right.
But, you know, he was kind of laughing and giggling the whole time. And again, the ability to manifest in an object anywhere, sort of violating the rules of time and space, like Pinker does in Shocker, kind of just loses you in the film. There's no ability to kind of anticipate when he might be there. I know the dream world is where he prefers to manifest, but it doesn't seem that he's limited to that either. There's a ubiquity of him and a omnipotence that should make him scarier, but in fact makes him somehow less scary to me.
Huh. Yeah, I would say to contrast Nightmare on Elm Street or Freddy Krueger and Pinker and Shocker is that the complexity of Shocker was too much. I think the plot line was too complex. I think that the change-ups as far as the motivation of characters and the different states in which the main character was operating within, I think that happened too quickly and that the audience couldn't accommodate these movie rules and scene transitions fast enough. Then the audience got overwhelmed. This is my prediction here, and then disengaged. And so, Wes Craven, I know you're deceased at this point, but if you're beyond the grave and listening, that's the reason why Shocker didn't do as well.
Somebody had to tell you the truth, even in the afterlife, Wes.
Yeah, you can't run away from my analysis of Shocker.
I remembered my third similarity. The father of the football star in Shocker is the police detective. And same in this movie, the father of Nancy is the police inspector. So 3 strange similarities. You had said in our Shocker episode that he had lost the rights. Wes Craven had lost the rights to Nightmare on Elm Street, and this was his ticket back in the door, his reboot in other guise.
That's correct. Yeah. So Nightmare came out in 84. Shocker came out in 89. So a 5-year difference. He lost the rights or ability to create new Nightmare movies. And so then he took the essential elements, mixed them in a stew, and created Shocker.
Did you notice any similarities with People Under the Stairs?
People Under the Stairs? Not really. I think that there are social elements here that Wes Craven himself highlighted as he sees Freddy as representing a dangerous father. Dangerous father figure, I guess, an archetype maybe. He sees it as a father that feels that the child is possibly doing better than them, and he then cuts off their life to prevent them from being better, surpassing.
The parents in this movie, particularly Nancy's father and mother, her father is a police detective, but he's very depressing and bland, and her mother is an alcoholic. So maybe her mother more than the father. I didn't see any hostility from Nancy's parents toward her, but that's the only sign I can see of that. But yeah, I didn't really pick that up, that Freddy was a dangerous father.
Right. It was kind of getting to motivations of Freddy. Why would he bother? And the other thing about this is if Freddy, his intentions when he's alive is to murder children, why would he then haunt adolescents? Why wouldn't he go back to killing children in their dreams?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is child killing a thing? Like, are there murders that specifically focus on children? Let's get into child killing.
Your favorite topic. I imagine that most people who are perpetrating crimes against children are probably a power dynamic thing, more like a control and maybe some level of sexual exploitation. I don't think they're really into the murdering so much. Yeah, but I don't know. It's not an area that I have a lot of familiarity with. but the motivation of Freddy Krueger himself, that's what I think Wes Craven was suggesting, that this father figure that is dangerous, who doesn't want their child to become better than them, and cutting off an innocence before it has a chance to blossom. This is what he's saying. I'm just repeating what he said.
Wait, he's dead right now. How could he be saying this?
This is actually a well-documented movie, you know, in the sense of articles, his reflections, commentaries, Wikipedias.
The first victim, Tina, the friend of Nancy, had that sleepover. And I have a note here that the sleepover happened because her mother was in Vegas with boyfriends, and that dad had abandoned the family years ago. So there are more badly behaving parents, but nothing hostility towards the teenagers from the parents, just neglect maybe.
I see you're kind of associating the parents of Nancy as in combination with Freddy Krueger, and I guess that could be it. I was thinking of Freddy Krueger standing on his own and him operating independently from the parents, but maybe a plot summary for those who haven't seen recently to kind of ground themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to it. It's a guy in a sweater he's got a glove that he puts on. I assume it's a glove with sharpened, and there's actually a scene at the beginning where he's outfitting that gear, but he puts on this glove with 4 long blades on it.
Same as Steven Pinker intro, remember that?
Yeah, that's right. And he somehow decides to terrorize this one set of friends, Tina and Nancy and Johnny Depp's character named Glenn. So basically 2 girls and their 2 boyfriends are the targets. Mm-hmm. And there's all this imagery around, there's like a little nursery rhyme, like 1, 2, something, 3, 4, shut the door. Do you remember what 1, 2 was about?
You know, I love your plot summaries. It starts with, this is a very simple movie, and then it goes on for 20 minutes.
Well, I'm trying to introduce...
Get real down into the gritty song lyrics of the movie.
I think the 5, 6 one is grab your crucifix. So there's this...
I see.
I'm saying I thought it was kind of a simple Freddy defense, Freddy versus the cross. And there's moments where Nancy, for example, when Freddy is manifesting above her head out of the wall, she inexplicably wakes up and pops her crucifix up on the wall, and that solves that. So it's this antagonism against Christ that Freddy can't deal with, but there's no larger deep dive into the Satanism or devilishness of Freddy. So
good point. Associating song with character arc.
Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, there's no real tension or it's just these 4 slowly get whittled away, and poor Nancy is the protagonist. She goes to school and realizes that she's fallen asleep in English class, and Freddy is there in school and dragging Tina's body around. And
okay, so let me give us a shot.
Maybe you should take over there.
So basically, the movie's about an antagonist, Freddy Krueger, who manifests himself in adolescent dreams. He was killed by the parents of these adolescents. Freddy then torments these adolescents in dreams. If he inflicts harm to them in the dream state, that when they wake, it manifests itself somatically. And then the only way to kill Freddy is to grab onto him physically and then be woken up at that moment in time. And then objects from your dream state can then be incorporated into your waking state. And then, well, the suggestion was to knock him over the head with a baseball bat, but he seems to be pretty immune to physical injury, even in the waking state, from sledgehammer smashes to being torched alive again, which is unfortunate considering he's already had that experience. At the end, it's a mystery what really happened. Nancy goes into a car, which is kind of represents Freddy in the sweater colors, the green and the reds.
The soft top.
And then drives away. Is she in a perpetual dream state now? Is she dreaming? I don't know. Do you have a conclusion on the end of the movie?
No, I was going to raise the same issue. It's a Shocker-esque, a Pinker-esque scene where Freddy is coming after Nancy, finally going to get her. And then Nancy says something along the lines of, it's just a dream. If I don't believe in you, I take away all your power, in the same way that quarterback man paused Pinker and, torched his TV. There's a little mental trick that she does, which she realizes she's the one giving Freddy all the power and all the physical manifestation, and then Freddy lunges for her and just like a phantom passes through her body. And then you think, okay, that's done. And then yeah, the next day when everybody's going to school again, Freddy's back as the car. And then and then there's something about mom, Marge. I got the impression she was the parent who orchestrated the vigilante hunt for Freddy. And
the mastermind.
Marge says at one time that she actually has Freddy's glove as kind of a trophy.
Mm-hmm. And she shows it.
But then, and then at the end, when Freddy manifests in that final showdown with Nancy, and Nancy sets him on fire, Freddy goes for Mom. So Mom seems to be also a target. In that final scene, it's Mom that gets yanked into the clutches of Freddy as the Freddy car drives away.
Maybe we can just fill this out a little bit, and then I want to get into themes of the movie. Maybe there's an assumption that, considering that Nancy seems to be the focal point here, that the mother, Marge, orchestrated or started the motivation of burning Freddy Krueger, and she felt she could do it because her husband was the police lieutenant or a police lieutenant. So
she felt entitled. She felt immune to prosecution.
Yeah, she felt like she had the sophistication and the ability to do this and the immunity and entitlement. I can make that assumption. We can make that assumption.
Let's do it.
Okay, done. So themes of the movie, or theme, let's say, the idea here where, and this was sort of floated a little bit by Wes Craven himself, that the characters are escaping their problems and they are the ones sleeping.
So Mom is an alcoholic escaping her problems. What other escape is happening? Yeah,
you're right. Mom is an alcoholic. Dad is escaping reality through black and white certainty of the law.
Is this your idea, or is this Craven?
I can't. Some of this is Craven. Okay. Most of this is Craven, actually.
What's that doing? Again, he's black and white certainty regarding the law.
Right. So there's no grayness. It's either right or wrong. There's no subjectivity to things, and so then he doesn't have to have a sense of responsibility. The law makes the decision, so he's kind of escaping that way. Johnny Depp, or Glenn in the movie, he's escaping through food. I don't know if you saw that little segment where he's eating a cheeseburger because it makes him feel more comfortable. He gets stressed and eats fries.
Yeah, he does say he stress eats.
And Tina is dating a guy. Her agency has been removed by a degree, suggesting that, well, my boyfriend will make decisions. I don't necessarily have agency here. He controls the show. So I'm removing my own responsibility of choice from there. And the boyfriend is just, I guess, placating his discomfort with life or by just engaging in sex a lot. So he's a physical and pleasure escapism that's going on with him. So yeah, sort of an escapism. And Nancy's the only one who has the focus, the sense of taking responsibility of problem by entering the dream state, or, identifying the problem and solving it. And she is the one not sleeping or not willing to sleep through life.
Wow. So Freddy, therefore, is not an evil father, right? He's something else in this framework. He's the dangers of living a life of fantasy.
Right. Someone who is sort of escapes from the challenge of anxiety and the challenge of personal development, those types of things.
Okay. I mean, I see Mom and her alcoholism is pretty heavily featured. I think what you said about Dad is pretty absent from what I don't remember a scene where he projects a lot of black and white certainty about things. Mm-hmm. There is one scene where Glenn eats, and there's one scene where Tina has sex, and one scene where Rod wants to have sex. But I mean,
he eats, and he also engages in watching TV and listening to music.
Escaping through food, TV, and music.
Right.
Just a side note on Rod, the amorous boyfriend. He is taken to be the killer of Tina.
Right.
Which seems something Freddy would want to encourage if Freddy has any fear of prosecution. If Rod is getting pinned for this one murder, why would Freddy go into the prison in order to strangle Rod with a bed sheet? Just a little note on Freddy's motivation there.
Yeah, I guess he's not worried about getting caught.
So if Dad is never targeted by Freddy, as far as I know, so what are we to make of Freddy's prior history of murdering children?
Well, for the first point, it could be that Freddy doesn't have an awareness of what's going on in the waking state. He's only aware of what's going on in the dream state. So he's just, where is this guy located? Why is he in jail? Who knows? He's just a delinquent. I'm going to murder him anyways. He may not even know that he's being framed for Freddy. What was the second piece?
If Freddy is punishment for escapism, how does the murdering of children from the past, does that map onto escapism? What's or not? Like, are these children that he killed before somehow guilty of not living a fully conscious life?
Right. No, that's a good question. I wonder if that's addressed in other movies in the series, because I do feel like Freddy's character is the least developed, and he's being asked to do multiple things.
There's a scene at the end, too, where after Nancy has ceased believing in Freddy's powers and it's morning and everybody's going to school and Mom's out on the front porch and says, I'm going to give up drinking. It's at that moment where she proclaims to want to get over her alcoholism when Freddy reappears and yanks her back into the house.
Right, so maybe she relapsed. I don't know. But so there's, as we kind of talk about these movies, there's a narrative element that underpins this that I have tolerance to, in that it needs to tell a story that's entertaining. And when you introduce some of these themes, they sometimes become secondary, because if you just follow the theme itself, then there isn't much entertainment to the movie. So I'm giving some permission along those lines, but I'm glad that you point those out. So yeah, it's the mother has freed herself from this alcoholism, and now she can face the world front on. But then Freddy pulls her to the front door. So maybe there's a suggestion that it was a temporary state.
We've talked in other films about the final girl trope.
Right.
And Nancy is that final girl in this movie. I wanted to read a little quote about how she plays the final girl, which kind of ties to what you were saying about agency. This is a quote from a review. In an era where the victims in slasher films were often portrayed as damsels running barefoot, and often half naked, of course, from the killer, Nancy Thompson stands out as the bold, defiant final girl who sets fire to tired tropes and dream-crashing boogeymen. Langenkamp, the actress, plays Nancy with the perfect balance of sweet and spirited. She captures the virginal innocence of the final girl trope, but unlike many Golden Age scream queens, she is certainly no damsel. Nancy is clever and proactive, finding a way to try and lure Freddy out into the real world, rather than simply sit or sleep idle and wait for him to make his move.
I didn't actually find her to be that capable of an actor. There are times at which she delivered lines that were a little cringy, but her physical acting was on point. Like, her feelings of distress and such were pretty good. But a couple of times she delivered a line, and I was like, ugh, that didn't go over very well.
I thought Johnny Depp was quite good.
Yeah, when he talked about how hungry he was and how that masked his feelings.
And I was like, damn, this guy's avoiding reality.
I do think that there are some social themes in here that might mirror The People Under the Stairs. Well, not mirror it in, it says the same message, but that it exists, and there's a commentary there. There's two little pieces here. One, that it appears that Nancy's from a home in which there's some dysfunction, and it feels like the other adolescents also have some difficulty, like Glenn, not so much Glenn, actually. Tina and Rod seem to maybe come from families that aren't the most stable. And so there's this theme of Freddy Krueger is out in the background. He's society's worst element, just available to, and then adolescents who are vulnerable are then captured by him and are exploited by him. So maybe a take after your children better, or Freddy Krueger will sweep them up in dreams kind of a thing, that there's an opportunistic element out there. and the only antidote is good parenting, maybe.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the role of these parents, and I wanted to highlight a couple scenes where they seem to be quite good parents. There's a scene where Glenn's father gets all defensive about Nancy and says that Nancy's crazy and he doesn't want his son Glenn to have anything to do with the girl anymore, and he takes the phone off the hook and doesn't want to allow Glenn to go over there anymore. There's Nancy's mom putting bars on the windows and taking down all the vine trestle things so that Glenn can't come over. So sort of protecting the damsel.
Pretty expensive project.
Yeah, and even more expensive would have been the overnight visit to the Katya Institute for the Study of Sleep Disorders, where Nancy spends an unproductive night undergoing sleep study. And that's the scene where she wakes up with Freddy's claw marks on her left arm, and his hat is also under the sheets.
His little fedora.
Yeah, his little hat. So yeah, I mean, there's evidence of good parenting, I guess, or at least defensive parenting.
Taking a kid to a sleep study. It's not a cheap thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The other social theme here is around the disconnect between children and parents. This was also kind of highlighted in Shocker, where kids have this barrier or a feeling of barrier to where they can't communicate clearly with their parents. Their parents can't hear what they're saying, and they just don't understand. And parents just don't understand it. I didn't know if that was like a theme in the 90s, because you got that kind of theme running through Nightmare on Elm Street. You had DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, that single.
Exactly.
Parents just don't understand it. And I was thinking, why is this in the zeitgeist? You know what I'm saying? Did parents not understand more in the 90s, or I guess mid to late 80s than they do now? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know if parents' comprehension has improved or if children's caring to be understood by their parents has diminished. Or thirdly, if we, you and I being somewhat older now, aren't listening to the cultural products that would voice the frustration of parents just not understanding.
Well, I mean, you have the helicopter parent, you have these themes that I'm not sure how strong they actually are, or if they're more in concept, where you have parents who maybe care too much. That's kind of something that comes up a bit. And maybe in like the mid to late 80s, parents didn't give a fuck. Parents just didn't care.
These are the people of the 60s and 70s, right? So the hippie generation and the Woodstock, and maybe they had a life of freedom and a teenagehood of drug use and rebellion, and maybe they presumed a desire for independence for their children, which their children actually would rather have had more connection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Think of that?
No, I heard it and I like it.
Yeah. I mean, and there's got to be a generational swing between neglect and over-involvement and vice versa that plays out. Maybe there's more directions that swing can swing in, but that's got to be a primary axis.
Right. That, and you had Freddy Krueger's glove and the Power Glove. That another strong association. The Power Glove came out, I think, in '89. So I don't know.
That's true, and yeah, you're definitely right about. I think today the pendulum has swung more towards parents being over-involved and overly protective, and helicopter parents, and not letting all these stories about not letting kids, go outside or play in the dirt, or for fear of all the terrible things that can happen to kids.
Well, did you hear Taylor Swift released a new single?
No. Please tell me what it's called.
Parents understand too much. That's, yeah.
Taylor Swift, the voice of today's youth.
Yeah, a little too old, I guess. Two little ideas here. One was I tend to, when looking at these movies and kind of considering my own interpretations, that I purposefully avoid other commentaries, other reviews, other influences from other people. And part of that is because I find that if I hear an idea that I guess satisfies the curiosity or is a good enough solution or a good enough theory that it kind of plugs my creative process, where I just kind of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess that sounds about right. And then the generation of possibilities doesn't come as quickly. I wonder if that's like a confirmation bias, or if it's like an idea around maybe just a primitive reliance on other people's ideas, where thinking is caloric expensive. It's a process that is it chews up a lot of energy. If there's a good enough idea, why waste the time and energy on coming up with alternate ideas? Like, a good enough idea is good enough.
So your urge to not read more widely about interpretations of this movie is a violation of the biological urge to preserve calories, because you'd rather do the calorically expensive thing?
Right. I think there's an element there where I'll watch the movie, come up with my own interpretations, and deliberately not look at others or hear others' suggestions.
Well, you took the same approach with your college education, didn't you?
Right. Yeah. I would deliberately not attend class so that I wouldn't be clouded by other people's judgments. And then I just made up the books myself.
Talk about, you had to eat a lot of calories to do that. Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I was always at the cafeteria.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. I like to go online and read interpretations of these movies, especially when I feel like I might have missed something that was important in the interpretation. And then I guess I feel like that it's fodder for more questions for me, rather than, I don't feel a sense of having my thinking being short-circuited by someone's idea. It's more like, maybe to an extent, like it shuts down certain avenues I would, but I feel like those avenues I would have taken would be based on utter ignorance. It's so I guess I view it more as wood for the fire, so to speak.
Yeah. Sometimes new ideas are springboards for others, but I've just found, generally speaking, that there's maybe an energy conservation that goes along with me when it comes to creative thinking. If someone gives me a solution or interpretation that's good enough, then it's more difficult for me to be more creative in my thinking. But
did that happen with this movie? Like you had an interpretation that you came across that short-circuited your thinking?
Yeah, so I had some interpretations, and then when I listened to part of the commentary, it was a lot more challenging for me to come up with other interpretations, because, well, they were coming from the writer, but they also seemed good enough. And so anything that I came up with felt wrong or felt less accurate, even though, as we kind of reviewed some of these ideas, they're relatively loose in their ability to summarize in a satisfactory way.
Well, it makes sense that if you had the director or the writer, that would be an authoritative voice, not just some, I guess most voices online, reputable movie critics and so on. But the writer in particular would be a very authoritative voice. So it makes sense that you would kind of be shut down from further alternative thoughts by the writer of the very film.
And that was my experience, Brian.
Yeah.
Last little piece here on Freddy Krueger, and then I wanted to talk about some masochistic dreams, is that I didn't really find Freddy Krueger all that intimidating. I think that the claws against metal, that sound it made, was pretty good. Like that was a terrible sound to hear. It was, but he, Freddy Krueger was like 5'10". He was kind of squirrely, kind of jokey. It wasn't very intimidating. The director, I think, I don't know if this was an afterthought or a intentional movement towards, but he had said something about how child molesters and those that typically go after children are smaller, I guess, in frame. And so he thought the 5'10" height of Freddy Krueger was more representative of what a child killer would look like.
I didn't feel like I got a solid read on his height. I didn't find him very scary, maybe because he didn't have a mask, and maybe because of his ability to appear anywhere and anytime through any means. Like I said earlier, one thing I did want to mention, that I have a quote that I'll read here in a second, but the scene at the very beginning where he's chasing Tina, the first victim, through that alleyway, and he has those sort of hilariously long arms.
Right, that's the scene where he seems incredibly tiny because Tina is close to the frame. he's far behind, and so he's just kind of jiggling back there.
I thought that was the most frightening depiction. And I thought that it kind of reminded me of those little Pinhead and his crew, the killer dolls.
Oh, right. Puppet Master.
Yeah. And I was expecting and hoping for more of that, because it was the way he could, sort of stretch Armstrong his arms. I thought that was going to be a continuing feature of the movie. But for the rest of the film, I didn't remember him really shape-shifting anymore after that. So
I found the scene where Tina is being dragged through the high school and she appears in the transparent body bag to be the most intimidating or disturbing, and that was done really well, I thought, for 84. I mean, when she was being dragged and her feet were raised and you didn't see Freddy Krueger, I guess, was pretty good. That was probably the best scene for me.
Yeah, I agree. And supposedly this movie was made on a very low budget. So, and I have a quote here just about all that, about the visuals and how it's a positive review of the visuals. Nightmare on Elm Street is a delicious bloodbath with visuals that make your toes curl. It's little wonder why so many of the shots are now so revered. From the geyser of blood gushing out of Glenn's bed, cascading down the walls, to the razor glove emerging out of the still bathwater between Nancy's legs, the imagery in Nightmare on Elm Street is stunning and at times surrealist. One of the most iconic death scenes in the history of the horror genre happens in the first 13 minutes of the film. Tina Gray thrashing on the ceiling against an invisible Freddy as her boyfriend Rod looks on in horror. From the spinning of the room to Tina's bloody corpse dropping from the ceiling, the scene absolutely holds up as one of the most visually striking deaths in the history of horror to date.
Wow. Gave me chills just hearing you say that, Brian.
Yeah, well, that scene was reminiscent of Poltergeist a little bit, I thought. The climbing up the ceiling and her sort of being half awake and crying for Rod to help. And really well done. Like you said, the Tina murders in particular maybe were the best.
I think most listeners would know this, but I don't think you would. There's a lot of references to Sam Raimi in this, where there's a little back and forth here where I'm going to try and recreate this from memory, so I might get it wrong. But in Evil Dead 1, there's a poster of The Hills Have Eyes that's ripped. It's kind of pasted on the wall and it's kind of ripped down. That was the assumption, is that Sam Raimi was saying The Hills Have Eyes was scary, but this is even more terrifying. And then in this movie, in Nightmare on Elm Street, there's a scene where I think Tina is watching Evil Dead. And so there's a reference to Evil Dead saying, well, this is even more terrifying than that. The people in my movie are just watching your movie casually. That's how impotent it is. And then in Evil Dead 2, there's a scene where Ash is leaving like a little work shed, and Freddy Krueger's glove is hanging on the wall there. So there's a little back and forth. And evidently there's something before that with Jaws, which I'm not familiar with. And then something after that with Ash and the TV series there was references there too, but I didn't watch those. So don't know.
I'm not familiar enough with those movies to have seen that, but I did read something that Wes Craven in the credits or somewhere gave a shout out to Sam Raimi as inspiration, in particular for all the fluids, all the blood gushing and so on. I guess that's a Sam Raimi thing. And I don't know if Wes Craven was directly inspired to include all the blood and funnels and volcanoes of gore, or whether doing that was meant as a tip of the hat to Sam Raimi. So do you view it as a competition or more as a friendly high-fiving each other between their movies?
I would probably put it within a mild competition, but respectful competition, Last piece here. Last piece here. Masochistic dreams. It's basically defined as someone who has unpleasant dreams about themselves. The image of the dreamer has a negative reflection of oneself. So if you have a dream and you're thinking poorly about yourself, whether you're subjected to unpleasant things or that you kind of reflect negatively on yourself, you're deserted, frustrated, deprived, injured. These are dream elements that would be classified under a masochistic dream. I'm sure you've had some. People have them, but maybe you haven't. I don't know. I don't think you're a big dreamer, Brian. Is that right?
I've never had a dream.
Okay, so
How does a masochistic dream go? Is it violent in the way Freddy Krueger is violent, or could it be like those dreams where you appear, you're in a public place naked or something?
Good question. This is a term that was coined by Beck, who is really the father of CBT. His exact language is...
Our audience might not know what CBT is.
So cognitive behavioral therapy, really just cognitive therapy. It's you either have cognitive therapy, which is a way of replacing the way that you think to then create a different emotional experience or outcome. Then you have
how exactly is that accomplished? CT.
I could go into that with a little more depth, but ultimately I think one way, then after thinking one way, I have an emotional experience or a outcome. If I change the way that I think about this, my emotional experience and outcome would be different. There's core beliefs and such, and it isn't so much that I'll just think better about this, or I'll ignore this, or I will just adopt a new way of thinking. There's a more framework that goes on and sort of a belief system and value system that needs to be irrigated or restructured. And then therefore I would then think differently and then behave differently and have a different emotional experience. Slightly unrelated, and this is kind of just a little bit here, but anyway, so Beck's definition is the image of the dreamer has negative characteristics, and the outcome of the dream sequence is essentially a negative one. The dreamer is either represented as less fortunate or less attractive than he really is, or he's subjected to an unpleasant experience. That's the kind of like definition. It's pretty loose. I don't think it's not satisfying enough for me, but that's what we're kind of going with. And the finding is essentially that if you are melancholic or typically have depressive tendencies, that you will have more of these dreams. It went in as far as people who have these types of dreams and they have more melancholic type tendencies, that they will have these dreams closer to the point at which they wake and then carry these experiences into their day. So it's like everyone has these types of experiences, but those who are depressive have them more often and tend to have them right before waking. So they bring this into their day and then it populates their thoughts and emotions throughout the day.
That seems to line up with Freddy manifesting in the movie.
Right, yeah. It's some belief or some experience that is destructive to the person, and then it has made a physical impact on the body, and then you carry that into your day, into the classroom, into your relationships. You've been Freddy Kruegered.
Yeah, you have been, basically. Yeah, there's something in the movie too about sleep deprivation and how that can affect everything. Nancy has to stay awake. Everybody has to stay awake to avoid falling into Freddy's clutches. Although I feel like that aspect of the movie is undermined as the movie progresses, and Freddy just sort of pops up whenever. Like in the final scene where he manifests as the car and snatches Mom, nobody's asleep. So, but there's a bit of dialogue where Nancy says she's been awake for 7 straight days, and then the writer volunteers the information. Nancy says that she had looked it up in the Guinness Book of World Records, and the longest ever was 11 days. So I don't know if sleep deprivation and all the negative mental consequences align at all with what you're saying about masochistic dreams, or if that's another theme that could be an explanation for what Freddy kind of represents. Freddy represents brain fog and the moodiness and so on.
Terrifying.
But, yeah, exactly. Nothing more terrifying than
mild irritability.
Less than 6 hours of sleep. Because I mean, as she goes deeper into this week of no sleep, she doesn't seem to suffer from a lot of negative mental consequences. She drinks more coffee, but she's not, having hallucinations or falling asleep very easily, in non-bed situations, for example. I feel like there could be a thing about like she's just walking to school. One of the things your body does is it'll just shut down for little micro sleeps in very dangerous situations. So like there could be a whole sort of another leg of this movie where Nancy's driving a car or Nancy's operating heavy machinery or something, and one of the dangers is that I think there's more field that they could have played on in terms of the sleep deprivation and the way our body reacts to that, and that's the danger. If they kept Freddy confined, I know I'm kind of going off topic here, but if they had kept Freddy confined to the rules of just sleep and so on, I think that the little micro sleeps in unexpected places and at unexpected times would have been a cool horror element. So masochistic dreams, I like this idea, but I don't really see Freddy manifesting as Nancy has a negative self-concept. And the fact that Freddy manifests to everybody, does that just mean everybody has a negative self-concept?
Right. I wasn't really attributing it to the movie, but in relation to the movie, it could be around the idea that I find that dreams are representations of my waking state. So things happen in my life, things that I'm concerned about, things that are impactful, and I have dreams about them. And so if someone is melancholy or has some negative self-doubt, then that would populate their dreams. Whether they carry that on into their life or when waking reflect, you know what, that's not really how I see myself. Maybe I did make an error here, and that's bringing some self-doubt or some self-criticism up, but today will be different. I can make a change and do something different. That's maybe the Nancy character, where she is reading books on how to booby trap her house and have self-defense books, and is trying to convince others around them about how they should improve themselves or find solution to problem. And so she's a solution-focused kind of thinker. And that's maybe the antidote to some of these depressive tendencies, that there maybe is a genetic component to it. But if you allow those thinking states to populate your mind and then play out in your day, then you'll just find yourself in a more depressed state by the end of the day and possibly into tomorrow. But if you Nancy it and put some time into problem solving, that you might find that your day tomorrow is maybe not significantly better, but 1% better. And so she's not sleeping through her day and being subjected to those circumstances. She's making positive change elements in her life to better herself.
Yeah, in contrast to Mom, who's just numbing herself through alcohol, and alcohol, in terms of what it does to your sleep, is aligns with that. You're not taking proactive steps to improve your life during the day by sitting there and drinking, and then at night you're probably making the quality of your sleep and the depth of your masochistic dreams even deeper through the alcohol and its effects on your brain's chemistry.
All right. Well, what a movie. And there's I don't know how many, 7 more. I'm not sure.
You know how when we hike and we climb a mountain and then there's a summit and we see a whole vista before us, John?
Yeah.
I feel like we're at that point now with this franchise. Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is in the books, and much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we're staring at a future of this franchise, and I see a sunrise in the distance. I have hope. I feel there's a beautiful bush-filled, animal-filled, and berries on those bushes filled pathway ahead of us. I've got high hopes about Nightmare.
Wow, quite the optimism there. Maybe that bush will catch fire at some point and attack us in our dreams.
It could. Yeah, I feel like we're in better hands with Wes than the
Toby Hooper
and the vending machine who will take on this job director who they got to do all the next ones. I'm assuming here that Wes Craven maintains control of the franchise, I suppose.
Right. I'm going to have to inform you of something that you're find quite disappointing, is that This is the only movie that he does.
Oh no!
He does this one and then like the new Nightmare, which is like 94 or something like that. But yeah, so the next one are going to be a mishmash of directors and a cobweb of terrible ideas. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't seen them in quite a long time, so we'll see how the landscape plays out in front of us, and we'll just have to wear our hiking shoes and navigate this uneven terrain as best we can.
Well, as with all valleys, we go through. We're there for each other.
That's right. All right. Well, till next time.
Until then.